Welcome everyone, and happy to have you here on our fifth meetup of the year, or 16 in total. Today we have Ed Hansberry as our special guest, and we'll have an amazing session on how to enhance Power BI using Power Automate. We'll go quickly through some introductory slides and start from there. First of all, just see the agenda of the meetup. I'll show you our next meetups. Then Ed will have his presentation. We have live Q&A reserved in the end, a small slot of live Q&As in the end if still needed. But Ed already told me that we can interrupt. I can interrupt anytime with the questions from the chat. And then we'll have, in the end, we'll have Raffle with the enterprise DNA prices. I'll tell you a bit more about it in a bit, and then the wrap up in the end. So some organizational stuff. Please stay mute during the session and don't interrupt. Please turn off your microphone, your camera. Please use the chat and prefix your questions with a Q so I can spot them easier and interrupt Ed whenever it's appropriate, and we can move from there. If you have problems with the internet connection, no problem. You can just drop off and reconnect. Teams is recording everything, and this is the point that I put for myself there. The meeting is recorded and it will be available on our YouTube channel. In terms of our next meetups, on June 30th, we'll have Pragati Jain with a session on storytelling with data. And then on July 21st, we'll have an Excel session. It's not 100% decided. This is why I left it like this. So it will not be Power BI. We'll have an Excel session. We'll see until then. And in August, on the 25th of August, we'll have the next meetup, but I will announce it either through email or on our next meetup. And here, if you follow this link, you'll see our all our recordings until now, and there's a very good playlist with a lot of really good content there. Coming back to the Enterprise DNA Raffle, for the new members, please note that since August last year, we have Enterprise DNA as our primary official sponsor. And then Enterprise DNA is sponsoring on each our live meetup 3 packages of 1 year annual membership plus 3 annual Analyst Hub memberships. Total value of around $1,500. And on every meetup, we are having a raffle for our members. And in order to participate in the raffle, you can either go to this URL or scan the QR code. You have it also on the bottom right. I'll provide the link during the session anyway. But if you want to participate in the raffle, just fill up the form and we'll have it in the end. Speaking of partners and friends, I just want to take a small time to shout out to some our friends from 2 sister user groups that are organizing a summit in the autumn, in September. It's My Data Summit, It's a lot of content. It's the world's first online conference that unites speakers talking about Microsoft various technology, focusing on Microsoft Office and Power Platform. It's a 3-day live event organized with Microsoft product group speakers, Microsoft MVPs, and community experts from different countries. There are about 30 sessions there with a lot of really good speakers, and some of them were already speakers on our user group. You can just see what names are there and be sure that all the content that will be delivered, it's really great. The session, conference itself is organized by my two good friends that are also organizing user groups in Saudi Arabia and Azerbaijan, Farah Shahik and Ilgar. So just go check out the details on it, and if you want to participate, feel free to do it. And now coming back to our session today, thank you, Ed, again for accepting our invitation. Welcome to Romania Power BI User Group. This is your first appearance as a speaker, but it's not the last one. Just as a full disclosure, we had a small talk just before starting the meetup. I loved one of the sessions that Ed had on data modeling last year, and he might come back with that session, that improved session in the future, but nothing is set yet. For whoever doesn't know Ed, he's a data platform MVP, Power BI community super user, and recently appeared in Power Query Magic show, which is done by Win Hopkins and an Excel MVP from Australia. He has a really good blog. Ed is working for P3 Adaptive since about a year. P3, it's actually one of the first sites that I followed when I started working with Power BI. It was powerpivotpro.com. Until now, we've never met in person. We've only met only online and in Power BI community. I think Ed is one of the first guys who answered one of my questions on the Power BI community site. Ed is doing all kind of free sessions for community user groups like ours, and I really love the fact that he took the time to come and present to us. I've learned a lot during his sessions and from his answers and all the things that he's posting on Twitter. Thanks again, Ed, for accepting our invitation, and please tell us a few words about you, and the stage is yours.
All right, well, thank you. It's great to be here. I appreciate the invitation. My background is I'm a CPA, which in the United States means a certified public accountant. So that's how I started my career. There's a few of us in that boat. I think Win Hopkins and Matt Allington and a few others are accountants. And at some point, we all got bored with debit credit journal entries, and we really enjoyed playing with Excel, but not to do balance sheets, to work with data. And then, like so many people, probably a lot of you started in Excel, and then you just kind of migrated to more powerful products like Power Query and Power BI to represent that. So I enjoyed it so much that I changed my career. And 2 years ago, I stopped being an accountant in the real world and started doing Power BI consulting. And then, as Christian was saying, I started with P3 Adaptive, which used to be Power Pivot Pro, about a year ago, and I'm loving it. I work on Power BI now all day long. And enjoy about 95% of it. But you know, there's always that 5% that you're banging your head against the wall, like what is going on? So that's the background on me. So my presentation is Power BI and Power Automated, making them work better together. let me start sharing my screen and show you how this topic came up and what my solutions are. So you should be able to see my screen. Is that correct?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay. So I was giving a talk.
Service.
Okay, yep. We're looking at the service, and I was giving a talk, it's been about 6 or 8 months ago, on your Power BI team and who that is, and how to most effectively make use of the team. And one of the things was, when you publish reports, always publish them in an app in Power BI. And one of the comments was, well, we have to give our users access to the workspace because periodically they need to go down here and refresh that report. And I said, no, you can do that with Power Automate. It takes like 5 minutes to set it up. And they're like, really? I didn't know you could do that. So I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can do with Power Automate that is really very simple. So that's sort of how this came up. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take this report, which is a very simple report. We can see it was last refreshed this morning at 7:36 a.m. my time. So it's 9:13 a.m. So I was just running some tests. So keeping on that timestamp, that's about an hour and a half old. But what we're going to do is we're going to add a button to this report and let users refresh it. And then we're going to look at a few more things with Power Automate and take it to the next level. So we're going to work through 3 or 4 scenarios as we do this. So this is the report itself. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a Power Automate button to it. And over here on the right-hand side are a couple of Power Platform buttons. Here's one for Power Apps. We saw Christian was actually using a Power App visual in his report earlier. This is the Power Automate button. When you add it, the Power Platform buttons visuals are a little strange when you first open them up. There's no data. This looks like a text box full of information. And you do have to read it to kind of get going with what's happening. First, you add data, then you set up the flow, then you apply it and share it, then you format the button. So to get this going, I'm going to move it down here so the button is not covering my whole screen once I do it. Normally, you would add data to the button. We don't need that for this particular flow because it's a simple refresh. We're going to add data later in the session. But to get started with it, you click on this ellipsis here for more options for the visual and you hit edit. And what it does is it signs you into the Power Automate service inside of Power BI Desktop. And from here, we're going to create a new flow. So it's an instant cloud flow. And it automatically created my trigger action. When a Power BI button is clicked, I'm going to click on a new step. And what I want to do is I want to refresh Power BI. So I'm going to look for Power BI. And there are a number of actions that you can take with Power BI. And the one I want, oh, they've added a few. So see, I just want the one that is refresh a data set. Here we go, refresh a data set. And then it asks for the workspace. So I click on the drop down. You have to be logged into Power BI up here correctly for this to work. If you are one of these individuals that are consultant that are logged into multiple tenants, you want to make sure you're in the correct tenant so you set up the flow in the correct tenant. So I'm going to go here to the Power BI samples report workspace. That's where I was over here a few minutes ago. And then it's looking for the name of the data set. And I have this data set called Power Automate and Power BI. And I'm going to hit save. And then it's saving the report. And I'm just going to call this refresh Power BI data set. And it skipped one of my keystrokes here. Refresh. Okay. I'm going to hit save again. It saves the name. Now, when you create a flow for the first time in Power Automate, you not only have to save it, you have to apply it. And the apply is a separate step, and it binds the Power Automate flow to the button in the report. So I'm going to go over here and hit save and apply. So it says it's saving. And you see now I get this green bar. You've successfully applied the data set to your button. If you don't do that, you're going to go back and push the button and nothing's going to happen. It's because the button's disconnected. So we've connected the button. So I'm going to go back here. Just for grains, I always hit apply again. And then I'm going to go back to the report. So at this point, I could trigger this flow in the report just to see if it works. So it says triggering. It's running. Now, it's going to reset, it's going to refresh the data set in the service, not the one on my desktop. So you can see I haven't refreshed this thing since March 6th of this year. So it's very old data. But if I go into the Power BI report, I'm going to go back to the workspace. Here's my data set. And you can see it is 9:17 in the morning, my time. So you can see this has already happened. And if I go in here, remember I told you this was at like 7:30 in the morning. If I refresh the visual, you'll see that now it's 9:17. So the refresh was that fast. It's a very small data set. It's not the full Contoso data set. It's a limited set of data. So now if I were to publish this to the service, the user would have a very simple button that they could click and run the report. But if you were paying attention to my workspace, and we're going to publish this in just a minute, you would see that there's this Power Automate data set, but it is really connected to this Contoso data flow. So what the user really needs to do is refresh the data flow, and then the data flow needs to refresh the report. So that requires a little more work. So let's go back into the button here, edit. Pulls up all of the reports that I have. I'm going to edit this one, all of the flows that I have. And I'm going to get rid of this. I don't need this anymore. So I'm going to delete the data set. I'm going to say new step. Data flow. Should see it. Refresh the data flow. There's only one thing you can do with the data flow, and that's refresh it. So the workspace again. So when you go into Power Automate, there are two workspaces. There's workspace and an environment. Environments relate to Power Apps data flows. We're working with Power BI data flows. So you want to go into workspace, then you select your group or workspace name, which was Power BI samples. And then a list of all of my data flows will show up, and there is the Contoso. So that's interesting. This GUID was not there a few days ago. I bet you that is my data mart that I'm playing with. I'm not going to click on that because I don't think that works, but I'm going to click on Contoso. And I'm also going to tell the user that their report is starting to work. So let's add some steps, make it a little bit easier for the user, because they click that button. Let's say that this is a 30-minute refresh. They may not know the button click worked. It says triggering, but what happened, we don't know. So we're going to give them some information. We're going to send it to them in Teams. We can do Teams, emails, you can do text messages, you can do any number of notifications. I hate emails, so we're going to use Teams to notify the user. So if you're sending it directly to a user via Teams with a post chat, you don't need to get their email address. You can get that automatically from Power BI. I want to post this in a Teams channel though. And to do that, we need to get what is called a refresh token. So let me just look for token. And there it is. Get an @mention token for a user. And you have to specify their email address. Well, you can get their email address from Power BI. So because we're in Power Automate in the Power BI environment, a lot of information from Power BI is available to us only here. Some of this information would not be available to the flow when you're creating it if you went directly to the flow service. So you get their user ID, the timestamp, etc. I just want their email. So it's going to put their email in here. It's going to convert it to an @mention token. All right. Now, the next thing I want to do, and I don't want to save, I want to hit new step, and I want to say post message. See if we can find it. Post a message in a chat or a channel. So we can post it as the flow bot. We could post it as a particular user. You could connect it to virtual agents. So again, it just can go all kinds of directions. We're just going to do it as a flow bot, and I want to post it to we're going to post it as a channel. As I said, you could post it as a chat and it would go directly to them. I want to post it in the channel though, because I want other people to see it. I'm not going to mention everybody in the team, but everybody can see it that, hey, Johnny has triggered a refresh on this report. So I'm going to say the channel, then it's going to ask me to pick a team. So here's my teams that come up. So we're going to do the goes nowhere, does nothing team. And then I think I have one called training data. And I'm going to say, hey, and now you see I have additional parameters that are available. And one of them is the mention token. I click on the @mention token, the data set refresh has been triggered. You could write more information. Please wait up to 30 minutes for the report to finish, whatever it takes, okay? But that's all I need to do. So I'm going to hit save. And then save and apply it. I'm going to go back to my report. I always hit apply one more time, even though I probably don't need to. Now, if I trigger this, so it says triggering, it's running a process. If I go to my workspace, you can see the spinning ants. The data set, the data flow has already started to refresh. And if I go into Teams, posts, there it is right here. So right here, it says, hey, Ed Hansberry, the data set refresh has been triggered. You can see it's 9:23 a.m. Get rid of that. And so, and it comes from the Power Automate flow bot. So now they will get a net notification. It's been refreshed. They need to wait 30 minutes. You can provide a link to the report. You can enhance this as much as you want. But now we have a problem. My data flow is probably, well, it says it's still running. Shouldn't take but a couple of minutes. It's very small. Yeah, just finished. Just finished while we were watching. But now the report hasn't refreshed. So how do we get the report to refresh? Well, once again, we do Power Automate. This time, though, we don't need to do this from inside of Power BI. I'm going to go directly to Power Automate. So this is my Power Automate session. This is the flow we just created. We can actually go into this flow and edit it if we wanted to. We could add more information. You could get much fancier with it, and it's full screen in the browser. Just be aware that not everything from Power BI is available in this flow, and that may or may not be important depending on what enhancements you're doing. But that's not what I want to do. I want to create an entirely new flow. So I'm going to say create a new flow. It's an instant cloud flow, and I'm going to skip this because what I need is not in here. And I'm going to create a trigger data flow, and a data flow refresh completes. So once again, I select the workspace. And the data flow, it's going to monitor the Contoso data flow. When that completes, I need to check a few things. This only checks when it completes. It doesn't matter whether it failed, whether it was canceled, or whether it was successful. I want it to only work when it was successful. So I need to create a variable. Everything you do in Power Automate, if you're capturing data and moving it between things, requires a variable of some sort. Sometimes they're auto-created. I need to create this one myself. So I need to initialize a variable, and I'm going to call it var refresh status. All my variables, no matter what the platform, start with 3 letters of var. It's a string, and the value is, it can be any dynamic content coming from any upstream flow item, and this is when a data flow refresh completes. And one I want is refresh status. And you can see here it says status of data flow refresh. Possible values are success, failed, or canceled. So I'm going to capture this, and then I'm going to create a new step. and I want a condition control, just happens to be the first one. If refresh status, so I've clicked on my variable, so now I have additional information, is equal to success, then if it's yes, I want to add Power BI refresh. Once again, I have to select my workspace and the actual data set itself. So it's the Power Automate and Power BI data set. If it's no, I can do an additional condition and say, if it's failed, I need to send an error alert to somebody to monitor it. If it was canceled, I would probably just say, I don't care because I canceled it, whatever I was doing. I'm going to go up here and name this refresh data set after data flow. Save this. Okay, so it is ready to go. It does not need any kind of scheduling or anything like that. It is monitoring in the background what's going on with that data flow, and we'll look at it when it finishes. So I'm going to go back into Power BI. We're going to test it. I'm going to click on this Run Flow. So now it has triggered the data set once again to refresh. So I'm going to go here and go back into Power BI, and we can see, is that started? Yep, so the data flow has started, and we're going to pay attention to these times here. You see that says 9:24 a.m. my time. So once that data flow finishes, that flow that I just created is monitoring that, and in a minute here, it should trigger this data set to automatically start refreshing. I can go back over here. We can look at it, we can see that it succeeded. You can actually click on the steps and it will tell you that it ran successfully. If I look at the condition, it will say, yeah, it went through and successfully triggered the data set refresh. I don't see that happen. Oh, there it goes. It just started as I clicked it. In a presentation, you're impatient, you want it to all happen. That probably took a grand total of 30 seconds. It has automatically triggered the refresh of my data set. So with one user button, data flow finished, data set finished, and my report now shows 9:29 a.m., which is what it is my local time. So any questions about that whole process before we kick it up a notch to do more with how this works? Any questions?
Nothing in the chat.
Okay. All right. So let's take it up to the next level. That's how you can let users refresh reports on their own when they need to and not wait for schedules to happen and things of that nature. Let's do something that's a little bit more productive. Here I have a very simple data set again, Zencontoso data set, and I have listed a bunch of sales by state. So if I just look at Alabama, here's my Alabama sales, Alberta, Berlin, etc. What I want to do is at the end of the month, I want to send a report to my sales team that are responsible for each of these sales regions and give them a list of their top items for the month. Okay, so this is the report itself. But the sales team, they may not need Power BI, they may not want it, or we may just want to give them an alert. These may not be employees. We could send these email addresses could be to outside people. And what it's going to do is it's going to go through, I've got some email addresses. It's actually a fake email address. It's my personal email address in the customer address file where the salesman would be responsible for it. But you would have, you'd obviously be connecting to your ERP system. You're connecting to vendors or customers or sales managers, whatever, you're going to have their real email addresses. What we want to do, though, is send them basically this visual at the bottom. Alabama, here's your items, which has your item number, your description, the dollar amount, etc. Now, the way I created that is a very simple measure. called order details. It's simply a concatenate X function. And I've just said, I just want to do the top 5 sales, and I'm concatenating the order number with the product name, the product code, and the amount of the gross sales. And then I have this character down here called Unicare, or Unicar. It stands for Unicode character. So Unicode character 10 is a line feed. And that's why everything down here is wrapping. It has nothing to do with the column width. It's always going to, if I make it too small, it'll wrap further. But if I make it bigger, it doesn't matter. That's why after this one here that says white $42, it automatically does a line wrap. So it's a way to make your report look a little bit better sometimes, depending on what you're doing. That's the email I want to send to my sales team. So let's create a button. Now here, I do want to add some Power BI data. I certainly want to add the details. I need to add the email address. And I need to add the state. Okay, so that is basically going to give me the same level of granularity that this has, and that's important. This visual here is what I would call a development only visual. I would not keep this in the report unless it was on a hidden page. Nobody needs to look at this visual. The point of it is, what is my data going to look like when I send it out to the user? You want to be careful about adding additional information to it. For example, if I were to add the order number to it, okay, let's say that I wanted to add the order number to it, and I also added it to Power Automate. What happens is you now see that Alabama is shown multiple times. There's orders. Let's go over here. You can see the order number. So here's my order numbers. If you added that to the Power Automate visual as well, what would happen is you would get multiple emails for Alabama, and the grouping would be by the order number and then the top 5 sales for each order. And that's not what we want. So just like everything else in Power BI, the level of granularity you have matters. That's why I create this visual. It helps me keep track of exactly what I'm doing. So I'm going to get rid of that. I was in the wrong visual. It's okay. I need to get rid of it from both places. I just want one email for Alabama and one for Alberta and one for all of these. So I want the Power Automate to have the same level of granularity. So if you're getting more or less emails or whatever it is you're doing than you expect, check the granularity. What are you sending to the visual? Now I can click here and say edit. It's going to once again take me back into the Power BI experience, or I'm sorry, the Power Automate experience. And I'm going to say a new flow, instant cloud flow. And once again, it is going to be when a Power BI button is clicked. So once I have created the Power BI button, the first thing I need to do is I'm going to create, I need to initialize a couple of variables because I'm going to use them a little bit later. So initialize a variable called our state. That is going to be text string. And I don't need an initial value. And the other one I'm going to initialize, I'm going to cheat here because I forgot what it is. Oh, it's just a timestamp. Because what I'm eventually going to do is I'm going to create a log of what's going on here. So let me go back to Power BI. You can rename your steps in Power Automate. It helps you keep track of what is going on. So I'm going to call this my state variable. Create a new step. Create a second one. Time variable. Timestamp. I believe that is also a string, believe it or not. And then I'm going to actually generate my emails. So what I want to do is email. I'm going to look at Office 365, send an email. Okay. Here's where it becomes very important to be in Power BI when you're doing this and not Power Automate directly on the web. When I click here, I close those panes so I can see more information over here. You can see that I have additional information from Power BI. I can see that I have the user email and I have the Power BI data email address. I don't want to send the email to the user. I want to send it to the email address that's in my Power BI data. This one down here would not be visible in the Power Automate service. So Power BI is communicating with Power Automate through the application to give me this information. So I click the email and you'll notice what happened is it automatically understood I'm going to be iterating over a table. So we created an apply to each step. So it added the email address and I can say, this is, the subject would be sales for, and now look at what I have over here. I am now deep into the Power BI data. I certainly have a lot of the basic information, username, user email. I don't care about any of this, but the Power BI data, anything that starts with Power BI data, that's coming from your actual report. These are the fields that I added in, and I want to add the state. And I can say, here are your sales for the month. And I'm going to add the order details. That's my measure. That's that table I created that had, it was concatenate X, had the top 5 with the unichar to get a carriage return. And then I'm going to hit save. And I'm going to rename it. Send emails to sales team. All right, hit save and apply. So I've successfully applied it. Just because I'm paranoid, again, I always hit apply one more time, and I'm going to go back to the report. This time I'm actually going to publish this to the service because there's something very important that we need to deal with before we take this any further. First of all, you do have some options here to modify this. I don't want to call this run flow. That's kind of boring. We're going to change it to send emails to sales team. And you can change many of the other things. If you don't like the color, we can change it to, that's a hideous purple, but we're going to stick with it. And then, you know, for this report, again, we don't need that data in the report itself. So I'm going to hit view, selection, and I'm going to hide that. All right, so let's actually publish this to the service. I'm going to go back to the main page so it is correctly showing. And pay attention, that's going to say March 6th. So when I do this, it's going to be a March 6th date. I'm going to send it to Power BI samples, replace. And I'm going to go to the service, refresh this page. So you can see here now it's an old report. That's okay. The data is the same. It hasn't changed. Now I have this send emails to sales team. Now, if I click this button, it's going to work. And I'm going to go ahead and click the button so we can get the, oh, I just messed up. Boy, I just sent myself 400 emails. I meant to select 3 or 4 states before I push the button. That's okay. Hopefully the email service won't spam me for sending 60 emails. I've been shut down for spamming myself. That's okay. This should not be a big deal. So you would want to select your filters first. But before you actually publish this to the team to let them use it, you have to go into the actual flow and give them permission to run it. So you would say edit, run only users. You can add individual emails or you can add groups. So I'm going to add my entire GNDN team. And they will be able to send the email and it will go out. It will look like it's coming from me and it will go to those individual users. Oh, here we go. Here's my 50 emails to myself. I had a filter set of my personal emails so they would go into a single folder. So here are all the emails that I just sent myself this morning. So let's take a look at one. Well, it worked. It said the sales for, the particular state that I was sending it to, that worked. Here are your sales for the month. And here is my nice, pretty table completely scrambled. So for some reason, it didn't honor my carriage return. So we can look at that and see why. So I'm going to go back to Power Automate. This is send emails to team. Remember I said that earlier you could go and look at the flow and see what it did. Not only can you look and see what it did, you can see the contents of it. And here is the contents of that email. And if you'll notice, it looks fine here. It didn't look fine in email. And the reason is, look at these HTML tags. I didn't have those. It did. So it said, here's a paragraph break. Here's a break. But there's no break after each line. So what I needed to do is, and it took me like 2 hours to figure out what was going on, I need to change my report so that it actually puts an HTML line break after each line, not a visual line break that I'm working with. So I'm going to go back here, just so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to unhide this table. And I'm going to edit my measure. So I'm not going to use the Unicare code. I'm going to say ampersand the HTML break. Okay. And then I'm going to hit save. Now, my visual looks like garbage, right? Because now, it's wrapping wherever it wants to wrap, depending on, how wide the thing is. But let's see what it looks like when I actually send it to the team. So I'm going to republish my report. I'm going to go back to the service, back to Power BI, go back to the overview page and just hit refresh. You want to make sure that everything's loaded properly. This time I'm going to remember to select, okay, I've got 3 states here. Let's just do Alabama, Berlin, and England. And now it's only going to send those 3 emails. And I left this visible so we can see what's going on. I'm going to click send emails to the sales team.
Sue is having a question here. Can you be specific about who you send what report to?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Sue Base is having a question. Can you be specific about who you send what report to?
Who I'm sending.
So maybe you can unmute and ask the question directly.
Hey Ed, this is brilliant. Really, really enjoying it. Thank you so much.
Yes.
I just wondered, can you say that if you wanted to send to Alabama, can you be specific and send it to maybe the Alabama salesperson? So you can almost iterate over and say, if it's this report filtered by Alabama, send it to this person who belongs to Alabama.
Yes, and in fact, that's normally what you would do. If I go into my emails, so remember what I added to the email blast button is the email address. And that would be the email address of the customer, the salesperson, whatever. I've hard coded all those in my database to be my email address so I can do the demos. But in the real world, that's going to be, Joe who lives in, Birmingham, Alabama, or, Mary who lives in London, England. So the emails would be going to multiple different people.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you, Ed. Really enjoying it.
Okay. Okay, so let's just go back to my emails and see what came through. We can see my 55 count here jumped up. So here's my new one, sales for England. And now with that BR code, it's actually working properly. So now if I go down to the next one, I send it to England, Berlin, I'm getting a line feed after end of each line. And then the third one was Alabama, there it is. If I go one more, that was the old cycle and everything was broken. So now I have fixed the formatting. You can get crazy with it. You can convert this data into an array if you're good with Power Automate. Then you can do a formatted HTML table complete with column headers and all kinds of crazy stuff. So I'm giving you a taste of where to get started. You can go completely nuts with it and add a lot more information to the emails to make them, really, really impressive. Let's do one more thing though. I need to understand when I sent these emails out and who they went to. So let's go back here to the Power Automate button, and I'm going to hit Edit. And we're going to edit my flow. And I'm going to minimize these panes. What happened? Why did I not go into the edit section? Okay, so remember I initialized the state variable and the time variable. They just exist, they're empty. The time, I could actually go ahead and set it here because the time is not going to change. And the time is coming from the timestamp. So I'm just going to add the timestamp here. The state, though, is dynamic. And what I need to do is I need to add the state at each level. So I'm going to do it inside of this. I'm going to set the variable state to be the Power BI state. So the state's going to be different with each, just like it is with each email, it's going to be different with each record. The time that I sent it is just going to be one time because it's the time that I pushed the button. Then I want to add rows to the Excel file. So add row into a table. So I have to get the location. So it's asking me for my SharePoint sites. And then it's the document library, which I believe is always documents. Now I'm going to browse for the Excel file. Power BI sample emails. And it only works with honest to goodness Excel tables, okay? So it's not a grid of data. I have a table in the file. And I've called it table log. And you can tell it's a table. I'm going to show you what that table looks like over here. You can tell it's a table because when I click on it, it says table design, and I can go into a table, and I'm a little limited in what I can do in in Excel Online. I would normally design this in Excel desktop. And in fact, for some reason, this says view only, and I'm not sure why that says view only. Oh, because I don't want to make changes. I just want to look at it here while I'm doing this. So I'm going to go back to Power BI. And you'll notice as soon as I hit log, it pulled up two fields, date and state. That's because those are the two fields in the table. So it read the table and it gave me all the columns. It could have been 50 columns and it would have given me 50 things that I could have filled out here. I want the date to be my timestamp variable and the state to be my state variable. I'm going to hit save, save and apply. That said something about concurrency. So when you're applying variables inside of an apply each loop, you want it to single thread. You don't want it to multitask because your variables can get out of whack, and it sent that warning. You simply go to the settings for the apply to each, and you set concurrency, degree of parallelism to 1. So it's going to do one email at a time. I'm not going to get this weird multi-threading thing going on. So you see that it says enable concurrency control for the apply to each loop and set its degree to parallelization to 1 when using the set variable action inside of an apply to each loop. So you don't have to remember to do that. It will tell you, and you just go to settings. And that's where it gives you any custom settings that you would not normally deal with. So I've already done that. I'm going to hit save. It says it's saving. I'm going to go back here, apply, because I'm paranoid again. Back to the report. I'm going to republish this. Power BI samples. I'm going to go back to the service. Refresh this again to make sure it's loaded what's in the report. Although I didn't change the report settings at all. And I'm going to do 3 different states so we can see it clearly. I'm going to do Georgia, Hamburg, and Kentucky. And I'm going to send the emails. So I'm going to go to my email. And I should see emails come through here in just a second for 3 more states. And they are not coming through. So let's go back to Power Automate and see if I mess something up. Well, it says it ran, so maybe I'm just being impatient with the. Yep, there they are. See, watch kettle never boils. Is that the term? So there's Georgia, Kentucky, Illinois. Okay, perfect. Or Hamburg. Okay. Now, if I go back to the Excel file, you'll see that it loaded in the log. So it shows the timestamps. Now there's a way you can go in and format these timestamps so they're human readable. This is, computer nerd speak where the date is a text and that's a timestamp, and it's that Z means it's Zulu time, so that's UTC coordinated time. There are functions that you can say format that as a general timestamp, but you can say that it went to Georgia, Hamburg, and Kentucky. And then I have an ongoing log of what emails I've sent, when I've sent them, to who I've sent them. I could add many columns. I could add a whole wealth of information to this. I did this to Excel because it's the easiest. You can add it to a SharePoint list. You can even write it back to a SQL server. So pretty much your imagination is the limit as to what you can do.
For writing to SQL, I think you need a premium connector, right?
That is correct, yes. So the premium connector there, it just means it's another level of the Power Automate service. It's not Power BI Premium. So it's like, I think it's
Power Automate licensing. It's really strange.
Yeah, I think
really
it's like $10 a month, or maybe it's $7 a month. I forget what it is, but that gives you access to the Microsoft Premium connectors. If I go to Power Automate, let's say I want to create a new flow just to show you what we can do. Let's do a scheduled flow. I'm going to skip this section. You can create a flow from a button. So this will add a button to the user's phone. They install Power Automate from the service, from their app store. They'll get a button they can push. They can actually start flows, so they can refresh a report right from their desktop. But if I go here and I'm going to search for SQL, so you'll see here it says Premium. Premium means you do have to have a Power BI Premium service. You can execute stored procedures. Now, be careful about these other premiums. Buying a premium connector license for Power Automate from Microsoft does not entitle you to write directly to send SMS messages or SQS messages via Amazon. You might need to buy a service from Amazon. So there's another subscription fee. So you just have to make sure you know where all the connectors are, what the pricing is. Usually things are pretty reasonable, depends on the organization, but not everything is free. So thank you very much for pointing that out, because that is exactly correct. Sometimes it's premium, sometimes it's not.
Yeah, we have a question from Bill related to this. Do you have to buy Power Automate license for each person who wants to push the button?
No. So the normal Power Automate license, that is a this would not be a premium feature to push the button. It's typically included with their Office 365 license. It's called I think it's called the Power Platform Plan, and it has very basic connectors, and pushing buttons inside of the Power BI report is quote unquote free. It's included with their Office 365 license. Now, your tenant can have that turned off. I'm working with an organization right now that they have it disabled, so users can't push the buttons. But it's not a licensing issue. It's the tenant has turned it off because we're not ready to launch Power Automate yet.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions about any of the things I've done, or anything else about Power Automate and how it interacts with Power BI?
There were actually two questions from Anthony and Kumar.
Okay.
From Anthony is the manual refresh still restricted depending on whether you are pro or premium?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It is still restricted. I'm going to use my words carefully here. The button push in Power BI still goes against your refresh tokens. So if you're pro, you get 8 tokens a day. If you're premium, technically it's 48, but it's really unlimited because Microsoft doesn't monitor it. The 48 is really restricted to scheduled refreshes because there's only 48 buckets. That's where the 48 comes from. You can push that button 100 times. When you say manual refresh, though, that's if somebody has access to the workspace and they go and they push this button. That's also unlimited because that's considered a developer feature. But I don't like using that as a way to circumvent the Microsoft licensing. It's 8 times per day for pro, 48, 100, 1,000, whatever for premium. And remember it's not 8 times per day. It's 8 refreshes in 24 hours. Once you push the button, that refresh token cannot be used for another 24 hours. So if somebody comes in the morning and pushes that button 8 times between 9 and 10 a.m., you can't refresh anything until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. It's dead. So in a pro environment, you want to be careful about it. Make sure your users know, they can only do it so many times a day.
Cool, thanks. This is the exact answer that Anthony was expecting.
Perfect.
Another question was from Kumar. Can we get status of data set same as we get for data flow?
No, so that's a surprising omission, but it is not there. You can find out when a data flow finishes. I think you're going to be able to find out when the new data mart finishes. It's not there yet, but to me, it just makes sense that that's going to happen. But when a data set refresh finishes, that trigger does not exist. If you go into Power Automate, I'm going to create a new flow. There's two pieces to every flow. There's the trigger and the action. A flow can have one trigger and infinite actions. So if I search for Power BI, there's when a button is clicked. There's a lot of stuff about goals. When a data-driven alert is triggered, a data-driven alert is when a report refreshes and a data value in a card changes in a dashboard. So that's something that's very easy to connect. But there is nothing in here about when a data set finishes. So you can't trigger anything based on a data set finishing. Just data flows. And again, I think eventually when it's out of preview and a little bit more mature, I suspect data mart's going to have a trigger as well.
Yeah, we'll see when it goes GA.
Yeah, and it might happen before GA. You know, you never know what's being in development when Microsoft is doing stuff. It could, like I said, it could come out tomorrow. It could come out in 6 months. Who knows?
Yeah. And as an MVP, you should know some things, but you're probably not allowed to say them, right?
Yeah, and you know, but this is just it's just me speculating. I don't know anything about what's coming down the pike or anything like that. It makes sense to me that they would have a trigger at some point when a data mart finishes, because that's when you can do other stuff like refreshing a data set in a Power BI report or other things. But it just depends on how the report's connected. So we'll see. We'll have to see, because the Power Automate team and the Power BI team are separate. They work together, but it's not the same group doing the same thing. So
totally separate teams, right? Yeah. One more question from Chandip. Can we schedule an automated flow? For instance, if the value meets the benchmark, then send the following custom emails from within Power BI?
So you want to automatically schedule the sending of the emails? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, this is what I understand. Chandip, maybe you can unmute and explain it a little bit.
Hey Ed, can you hear me?
Yes.
So let's just say that we have a sales and a benchmark value, and not really the goals feature, but a general sales and the benchmark value. And for certain criteria, if the sales actually meet the benchmark or is not meeting the benchmark, we would want to trigger a few emails automatically within Power BI.
And you said you wanted to do that not using the goals feature, is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so yes, you can, but it's tricky. What you would have to do is, in your Power BI report, you would have to create a card or a gauge visual, because it has one value. Once you publish that report to Power BI, I don't think I have a card in here. I don't. If I were to click this though, I'm going to add this. Well, I don't even have the ability to add it as a dashboard because I don't have any dashboards in here. What you would do is you would add that card to a, oh, there it is right there, it's over here, pin to it, pin the visual to a dashboard. So I'm just going to call it test. Okay, so I'm going to go to my dashboard. Now, you cannot do it with a bar chart, but with a card, you could say there is another option here that's missing. That would be a data-driven alert. The problem with data-driven alerts are it's only when it meets a certain criteria or when it changes value. So you would have to create kind of a weird measure that would be 1 or 0. Okay, 0 is you're meeting your goals. 1 is you're not meeting your goals, therefore trigger the alert. The report refreshes, the card changes to 1, the data-driven alert triggers, then you go over into Power Automate, and then you start creating your email saying, hey, you know, this shipment's going to be late, or whatever your condition is. So it is possible, but it's a little tricky to do because it's the logic that you can create in the data-driven alert is pretty binary. Is it above this number or below this number? You can't have this like, is it between these conditions and blah, 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 blah. Is it over or under a certain amount? I think goals is probably a better way to do it longer term, but you can absolutely do it the old way before goals came about.
Okay. Thank you, Ed.
Mm-hmm.
I've used the data-driven alerts from a dashboard for auditing errors in a Power BI report. So whenever I had more than 0 errors, an automatic email would come, so I can check the details and everything.
Yep.
But as you said, it's much more complicated here. Go back and refresh it.
Yep, it's a little tricky, but it is automatic. And I do have I have clients that I have set up data-driven alerts. I have the dashboards there. I don't publish the dashboards in the service. So when I create the app, I go and turn the dashboard off because it's just a bunch of cards that are often 1s and 0s. And it's when it's over a certain amount, boom, it sends them an email or sends them something in Teams. And then in the alert, I have the URL going back to the report in the app, and then go and see what the heck's going on and figure it out and fix whatever that condition is that needs to be fixed in the organization.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. I think this is it from the question point of view.
All right, cool. Well, I hope it was informative.
It was really great. Thanks again for coming and presenting to us.
Oh, thank you for having me. I hope it maybe stirred some, got the juices flowing in some brains saying, oh, I could do this, that, and the other in my company and, you know, avoid issues or avoid some manual work.
It did for sure. And I saw a lot of great feedback in the questions. Well,
okay.
These were our questions. Let's go quickly through the raffle and see.
I'm going to stop sharing. Yeah, okay. So you took over the screen. That's good.
Yeah. Let's see how many people registered for the raffle. Let's refresh the report first and check also our spread. So the Romania Power BI user group is going to Canada, US, and I think it's not sure which country is here. Vietnam, probably, right? 9 records, 7 participants in the raffle. Well, as I said, this Power BI report is built using several components in the Power Platform. Power Automate to fill up a SharePoint list, and then this Power BI report and the Power Apps that is randomizing the numbers. But I found a glitch in the Power Apps on randomizing, and we will be using a different one, the wheel of names that I did use in the last 2 meetups because I had no time to fix the Power App. So let's put all the participants here, shuffle a bit, and let's go to extracting our 3 winners. Marius, you are the first winner. Congratulations. From Romania. Really cool.
Thank you very much.
Let's go for the second winner. Winston, congrats, from US. I'll send all 3 of you an email after this meetup to confirm your email addresses so we can do the registration. And now spin it again for our 3rd winner. Looks like Alejandra from Canada.
Yay, thank you.
Congrats. I'll send all three of you the email after this meetup. Thank you all for joining, and thank you, Ed, for taking the time to come and present to us. It was really, really cool. And we'll keep in touch for our next session on data modeling, because I'm really believe that data modeling session would help a lot of people that are already using Power BI. And
Great. Yeah, we'll be in touch, and we'll try to do something before the end of this year. Cycle through some of your other guests, and then I can come back this fall. I'd really
probably
enjoy that.
During the fall, October, November, we'll see.
Perfect. Yeah. All right.
Thanks again, Ed, for coming, and thank you everybody for attending our session.